The morning after I kissed him without the physician counting, Victor forgot his cane. 6 steps into the wrong hallway, and every servant who saw him understood the miracle had changed shape. Saliva had kept him alive, blood had saved worse wounds. But desire had healed him differently, and Relka's notebook was already open on the table. If my wanting could make him stronger, how long before the house noticed? Chapter 1. The Fountain. Black water trembled under a skin of ice, and Victor Torchet sat in the fountain in his nightshirt, as if the cold had called him by name. He was shaking too hard to look noble. His blonde hair had come loose at the nape and stuck in wet threads to his cheeks. His lips were pale. His hands gripped the stone rim, not to pull himself out, but to keep himself upright while the water climbed his ribs. I stood barefoot on the frost, with another man's blood still warm at the back of my tongue. Before I ran to him, I counted 4 lit windows in the east wing, 2 garden doors, 1 service path with fresh footprints, 37 paces to the locked room where my mother slept, if Relka's medicine had taken, 12 more to the inner stair, 1 guard smoking beneath the kitchen arch, no physician yet. Then Victor coughed, and the sound broke in half.
Get out of the water.
He tried to laugh. It came out wet and thin.
You'll leave?
The fountain was black under the moon. The ice had not taken the center yet, only the rim, so every time he shuddered, the water rang softly against the frozen edge.
If I get better,
he said, teeth chattering so badly the words scraped.
They send you away.
My first feeling was not pity. I wish it had been. Pity would have been easier to carry. I felt fury so sharp my fangs pressed against my lower lip. I felt fear for my mother behind her locked door. I felt the small, ugly thought that if Victor died, the Marquess would not bury his son alone. He would bury us with him. I stepped onto the ice-slick stone.
Victor.
His pale blue eyes lifted to mine. There was no deathbed sweetness in them, no noble gentleness, only a child's desperate, selfish terror dressed in a soaked nightshirt.
I didn't want you gone.
I slapped him. The sound cracked through the courtyard. His head turned with it, and for 1 bright second he stopped shaking. Then his hand slipped. I lunged and caught the front of his nightshirt before the water took his mouth. The fabric tore under my fingers. My feet slid. Frost bit my soles. Somewhere above us, a curtain moved.
Do you think I can bury you and still save her?
I hissed, hauling him up until his chest hit the rim.
Do you think your father will look at your corpse and thank me for trying?
He stared at me, stunned and fever bright.
Then stop making me responsible for your dying. If you want me near you so badly, do something useful with the life I keep putting back into you.
He did not answer. At the time, all I could see was the fountain, his soaked linen, the black water, the servant's footsteps coming too late. The water dragged at his nightshirt. His pulse fluttered beneath my fingers like a trapped moth. When the servants finally came running, I still had 1 hand fisted in torn linen, and the other pressed over his mouth to keep my healing warmth against his breath. Victor listened to me being punished later through the sickroom wall. I learned that afterward. He lay feverish, strapped beneath too many blankets, with the slap fading on his cheek and his eyes open until morning. Chapter 2. The Locked Door. Years before the fountain, I arrived at Torchet Mansion in a rain-black carriage with mud on my shoes and my mother's blood under my nails. I was 12 then, old enough to know what a marquis could do, young enough to think showing my teeth might matter. The bells of the village church had not yet rung morning prayer. Garrick Torchet had moved before the bells could. The church liked bells before killing. Bells made murder sound orderly. The Marquess preferred locked doors. He stood in the entrance hall beneath a chandelier that could have fed a poor family for a year if it had been sold by the crystal. Blonde hair, gray at the temples, broad shoulders, a military stiff coat of deep wine and antique gold, a heavy signet on one hand, a pocket watch in the other. He looked at me the way men looked at ledgers. Beside me, my mother kept one hand pressed over her sleeve. The cloth was dark there. Her dark brown hair, silvered at the temples even then, had come loose from its pins. She wore her patched shawl, and indoor slippers because they had taken her from our room before dawn. She smiled at me as if we were visiting a neighbor.
It's nothing.
I could smell the lie. Blood has its own temperature in the air. Human fear does too. Hers was warm and quiet and trying not to frighten me.
Mother.
Her fingers closed around my sleeve instead of my hand. That was how she held me when she was afraid of being pulled away. Garrick Torchet shut his watch.
You are not a guest. Do not make me explain what that means twice.
My clan had hidden me because vampire healers were born rarely, and rare things were either worshipped, burned, or owned. My mother was human. That had made her brave in ways no vampire strength could protect. A narrow man with ink-stained fingers opened a blank book on a silver tray. He wore spectacles and smelled of sage, boiled linen, and old coins. Bastian Relka, the household physician. He looked at my mouth before he looked at my eyes. Then he looked at those too.
Muted garnet.
His pen scratched, eyes, red variant, fangs, delicate upper pair. Saliva response, untested, subject, resistant. He did not ask my name. My mother gave it anyway.
Julia Drazen.
His pen moved again. Name then. Not girl, not daughter, not captive. They took my mother toward the east wing. I followed until Tobron Casker, the estate steward, stepped in front of me with his ring of keys at his belt. Compact, weathered, knife scar tucked beneath his jaw. He simply blocked the way. Men like that could keep their hands clean while someone weaker sat in a locked room. My mother turned in the doorway. Her warm brown eyes found mine.
Do not let fear teach you obedience forever.
Then the door closed between us. The key turned. That sound became part of my body. Even years later, even in rooms where no lock moved, some part of me listened for that click. They brought me next to Victor. He was 7 years old, though at first I thought he was younger. He sat in a wheelchair by a bed with too many pillows and not enough warmth. A folded blanket covered his knees. His hands rested on top of it, thin and pale, with old pressure marks near one wrist, where straps had held him still for treatments that had failed. Blonde hair lay fine and straight against his forehead. His pale blue eyes were too large for his face. He looked at me, and I hated him because he was alive. That was unfair. I knew it even then. I hated him anyway. Garrick stood behind his chair.
My son will live. Your mother will live while you make that possible.
Victor's mouth parted, but no sound came out. Relka set down a porcelain basin, a folded cloth, and the blank ledger.
Small doses first. The boy's constitution will not survive direct blood exchange. Saliva only. Brief contact. Twice daily. We will record pulse, color, fever, cough, appetite, and sleep.
He spoke as if I were a bottle with uncertain strength.
Come here.
I did not move. The Marquess's gloved thumb brushed his signet.
Your mother's room is near enough that she will hear if I must remind you.
I crossed the floor. Victor began to cry without making noise. Tears slipped down his face, humiliating him more than me, I think. He had the training of a noble child and the body of a dying one. Neither helped him.
I'm sorry.
I bent because hands pressed between my shoulder blades. The first healing was a closed-mouth touch, counted in heartbeats by the physician. Clinical. Watched. Unwanted by both of us. My saliva warmed against Victor's fevered lips, and the old clan power in me answered before my pride could stop it. His breathing eased. Color rose faintly beneath his skin. The pulse in his throat lifted under the skin like a thread pulled tighter. Relka wrote before Victor had fully opened his eyes. Dose accepted. Pulse improved. Salivary transfer viable. I wiped my mouth so hard afterward that my lips split. Victor noticed. He said nothing. That made me angrier than if he had begged. At the door, he gathered enough breath to speak again.
I'm sorry.
Then ask him for the key to my mother's room.
He looked down at his useless legs. I understood then that kindness could sit in a chair and still not move. Chapter 3, The Ledger. The ritual settled into the house like a stain no one would name. Morning and evening they brought the tray, basin, cloth, ledger. Sometimes Odessa Torchet stood near the curtains with her lace gloves and pale fan, her green eyes lifted in disgust as if contamination had manners and should apologize. Victor's mother was beautiful in the way winter glass is beautiful, slender porcelain, brown hair pinned so tightly it looked painful. Her gowns never rustled by accident. Even her anger seemed fitted by a dressmaker.
She should not touch him longer than necessary.
Odessa said the third morning. Relka adjusted his spectacles.
Longer contact improves absorption.
She is a vampire.
She is a healer.
She is a thing my husband dragged inside before the church could burn it.
Victor flinched. I did not. I had already learned that stillness made adults unsure how much you understood. The physician counted under his breath. The Marquess watched his son's color. Odessa watched my mouth. The staff looked away. Every time I touched Victor, the house turned my body into a procedure. Every time he breathed easier, my mother's door stayed locked. Those were the terms. Relka did not stop at saliva. He tested blood in a silver cup, not on Victor at first, but on a cut he made across a servant's thumb. He tested the warmth of my skin after feeding. He tested how long healing lingered in cloth if I held it to my tongue. Once, after my mother spent a night coughing behind her locked door, he stood between me and that corridor with a small glass vial in his hand.
Do not blink.
I knew what he wanted before he said it.
No.
Garrick looked toward the east wing. My eyes burned. I kept them open until the room blurred. Then one tear slid down to spite me, hot with fury and fear. Relka caught it against the lip of the vial before it reached my jaw. He placed the tear on a shallow cut near Victor's wrist. The skin closed faster than saliva had ever managed. Victor stared at the healed line, then at me. His face went gray with something that wasn't illness. Relka wrote 3 careful words, lacrimal source viable. Later, when no one watched, Victor scraped the page with his thumbnail until the ink tore. Not enough to erase it, enough that Relka snapped at him for damaging medical property. I saw the ragged mark in the ledger for years. At first they fed me animal blood in sealed cups from a locked pantry cabinet. Pig, calf, sometimes old sheep. It kept me alive the way damp wood keeps a fire from dying. My hands stayed cold. Sounds arrived late. Once, during an evening dose, my fingers shook so badly against Victor's blanket that Relka told me to steady myself.
I am steady.
I was not. When I bent to give Victor the dose, the healing came thin. His body tried to take what I did not have. His chest seized and he coughed blood into a white cloth. For one breath, the room forgot me. Garrick moved first. He gripped the back of Victor's chair, his knuckles whitening around carved wood.
What did you do?
Nothing.
Relka touched the cloth, smelled it, and looked at me with a new kind of interest.
Animal blood is insufficient.
The Marquess's blue stare shifted to him.
She is weakened. The healing destabilizes when she is underfed. If you want reliable improvement, she requires proper blood.
Odessa snapped her fan shut.
Absolutely not.
Garrick did not look at her.
From whom?
The donor roster began there, not with screams, not with chains, with a practical question asked in a sick room. Casker built it inside an account book. Adult staff only, because children died too easily, and dead children made servants talk. Coin for some, debt forgiveness for others, forged recommendations, threats, letters, names of sisters, husbands, fathers in prison, mothers needing medicine. The house knew how to turn a wrist before I ever touched it. Only a few knew the whole arrangement. Garrick, Odessa, Relka, Casker, and the people too trapped to survive knowing. My first staff donor was a laundress with rough hands and a husband who owed rent on Torchet land. Her eldest son had an apprenticeship paper Casker could make disappear. She held out her wrist and did not look at me. Casker stood behind her with his keys, forward-leaning, listening even to breathing.
Not too much.
We need her upright for sheets.
I wanted to refuse. Then I remembered my mother's door. I fed. Human blood steadied me so quickly I hated myself for needing it. Warmth reached my fingers. The room sharpened at its edges. The next time I healed Victor, he slept 6 hours without coughing. Relka wrote 3 pages. The house called that success. A kitchen servant named Tobin Brindle tried to quit 3 months later. He was young, freckled, always wiping his hands on his apron even when they were clean. He had a chipped front tooth and an old bite scar near his collarbone, from before Relka learned to schedule feedings properly. I heard him whispering in the service corridor that he had seen too much, that his cousin could get him work elsewhere, that he did not care about the wages anymore. Before dawn, he was gone. His wages remained in the steward's book unpaid, Casker said.
Brindle left service.
No one asked why his trunk stayed in the attic. I found it 2 weeks later while searching for a loose tile where I thought someone might have hidden keys. The attic smelled of dust, old rain, and people the house had misplaced. Tobin's trunk sat under a sheet. Inside was a folded shirt, flowers still trapped in the seams, and the faint scent of his skin near the collar. My own bite mark had scarred there. I closed the lid. For a long time, I kept my hand on it. That night, Victor watched me from his bed while Relka prepared the tray. He was still small then, still folded in blankets, but less gray than before. His eyes moved to the blood cup in my hand.
Are you ill?
No.
You look... Do not make me be grateful that you notice.
He went quiet. After the dose, he whispered.
What was his name?
I should not have known what he meant. I did. I looked toward the closed ledger.
Ask your father.
Victor's fingers tightened in the blanket. He did not ask his father, not then. Chapter 4. Sweets on the Windowsill. Victor learned to offer things where I could refuse them. That was the first clever thing he did for me. He did not hold out sweets in his hand and make me perform thanks. He left them on the windowsill after withheld feedings, wrapped in paper, twisted at both ends. Honey drops, candied peel, little sugared plums from Odessa's tea trays, things meant for children and invalids and women in drawing rooms, not for vampires who bit servants in corridors. He always placed them just beyond the physician's tray. The first time, I left the sweet until ants found it. The second time, I threw it out the window. The third time, I waited until he slept, took the wrapped plum, and kept the paper. I kept it for usefulness, or that was the story I gave my pride. Paper could hold a message, stuff a lock gap, mark a route. By nightfall, it was beneath my pillow. Victor asked questions as he grew strong enough to stay awake through afternoons.
Where did you live before?
He asked once when rain blurred the windows.
Somewhere with fewer curtains?
Did you have a house?
No. We had rooms. Houses make people easy to count.
He considered that. Victor always considered before answering, even as a child.
Were there many of you?
I touched the clan charm hidden under my collar. Sava Drazan, old as winter roots, had told us never to count our dead aloud in rooms with doors.
Enough.
He knew it was not an answer. He accepted it anyway. That made him dangerous in a quiet way. He could leave a silence alone until you filled it later by mistake. Maud Brindle saw the sweets. She was senior housemaid by then. Pale brown eyes, tightly pinned hair, severe mouth. Tobin's cousin. She kept her mourning pin hidden and her posture perfect when watched. I had once seen her standing alone by the attic stairs, with a cleaning cloth in her hand and no room left to clean. She reported Victor's kindness to Odessa. The next day, Odessa caught me in the private corridor outside the sick room.
You encourage him.
I stood with my shoulders drawn inward, hands folded so she could not see my nails.
I speak when required.
Her fan tapped against her gloved palm.
My son confuses need with attachment. That is an illness, too.
I would not know. Your physician only records the illnesses that help you.
Her slap split the inside of my cheek. I did not strike back. My mother's room was down the hall. I knew the distance exactly. Victor tried to take blame when he saw the bruise.
I
Lefton,
he said, voice trembling.
the sweets. I did it.
Garrick was in the room. His signet hand rested on Victor's chair.
Yes, you did.
Victor looked relieved for half a second. Then Garrick added,
And your kindness gave your mother a reason to punish someone who could not stop her. Sympathy is useless if you cannot protect anything.
Victor stared at him. I hated Garrick for saying it. I hated more that it was true. That night I took the newest suite from the windowsill, only after Victor's breathing had deepened. The wrapper was pale rose, twisted neatly at both ends. I smoothed it flat under my palm and hid it with the first one. In the morning, Victor saw the empty sill. He did not smile. He only closed his eyes, and the line of his mouth eased as if a fever had broken somewhere I could not heal. Chapter 5, Bite Marks. The first time Victor saw me feed from Cavan Mardell, he was old enough to understand jealousy poorly and young enough to mistake pain for permission. Cavan worked in the stables, sandy brown hair, thick and uneven at the nape, wary dark blue eyes, strong shoulders trained to lower themselves around nobles. He always adjusted the cloth at his neck before entering the corridor, as if fabric could make what happened less visible. That evening Victor's dose had taken badly. Relka blamed a fever change. I blamed the weak blood cup they had given me after a day of punishment. Casker blamed whoever was nearest. Cavan was brought through the service corridor, sleeves rolled, vest still smelling faintly of hay and horse. He kept his eyes on the floor.
Just enough.
Cavan swallowed.
My sister's papers.
Casker's keyring shifted.
Still where they ought to be, if you stand still.
I looked at Cavan's throat. The paired bite marks there were not fresh, but not healed either. His rope-burned wrist twitched at his side.
Wrist.
Casker's mouth thinned.
Throat is quicker.
Wrist.
Cavan looked at me then. Gratitude would have insulted both of us. What crossed his face was closer to relief, sharpened by shame. He held out his arm. I fed carefully, counting his pulse with 2 fingers while my mouth sealed over his skin. Human blood answered in me with a steadiness animal blood never gave. Cavan smelled of cold air, leather, and fear he had learned to hide. I took only what I needed to keep Victor breathing through the night. When I lifted my head, Victor stood at the end of the corridor. Not well, not steadily. His hand gripped the wall. His nightrobe hung too loose on him, but he was upright. His eyes were fixed on Cavan's exposed wrist. No, not the wrist. The marks near Cavan's throat. Cavan fumbled with his sleeve. Casker swore under his breath.
Back to your room, my lord.
Victor did not move. Later I found him in the library, sitting with the donor roster he had no right to touch. It was hidden inside an account book. He had opened it to a page where a name had been scratched out so thoroughly the paper had torn. Tobin Brindle. Victor touched his own throat.
Use me instead.
I shut the book.
You'd faint before I swallowed.
Then take less.
No.
His jaw tightened. His cheeks were colorless except for 2 high spots of fever.
I don't want them near you.
They're not near me because they want to be.
My voice came out low enough that he finally looked at my face.
My hunger is not a favor you can volunteer for, because watching hurts.
I only meant...
I know what you meant. That's the trouble.
He looked ashamed. Good, I thought. Then I saw his hand still at his throat and felt something more complicated than satisfaction. Sava's voice rose in memory, dry as old leaves. Kind nobles become dangerous when they believe pain has made them owed. I stepped back from him.
Go to bed, Victor.
He did not. He stayed in the library with the torn page until the candle burned low. After that, he began watching Casker's keys. Chapter 6. The Fountain Again. Controlled healing, repeated morning and evening, made Victor strong enough to stand for longer than a prayer. The mansion whispered miracle. Relka changed his notes from decline, slowed to improvement sustained. Odessa began inviting church-approved visitors in small numbers, as if respectable eyes could scrub the method from the result. Garrick smiled more often, which made servants move faster. Victor learned the cane first. Carved, dark wood, silver top, fitted to his hand. He hated it. He used it anyway. One afternoon, after Relka had left and the curtains had been opened for rare winter sun, Victor walked from the bed to the chair without touching the cane. It was only 8 steps. He looked at me as if he had crossed a sea. I should have said something kind. Instead, I said,
Good. Hurry up and recover so I can leave.
His face changed so slightly another person might have missed it. I did not miss much in that room.
Will you?
Yes.
The answer was too quick, too sharp. I said it because I had to believe it. That night, the house slept badly. Houses like Torchet Mansion never slept fully. They settled, listened, shifted their weight. I woke because the air had changed. Cold had entered the corridor. Victor's room was empty. The fountain courtyard lay under moonlight, every stone silvered with frost. I found him in the water. By the time servants came running, I had dragged him out and wrapped my own shawl around his shaking body. The slap still burned in my palm. The words sat between us, crueler than the cold. Become useful. Garrick had me locked in the old linen room until morning. Odessa wanted my wrists bound. Relka said binding would interfere with healing capacity. Casker said nothing and watched the bruises rising on my arms where he had dragged me. From the linen room, I heard Victor coughing through the wall. I heard my mother calling my name once, before someone told her to be quiet. At dawn, they brought me back to the sick room. Victor lay feverish, lips cracked, eyes open. He looked worse than he had in months. The slap mark had faded to a pale red shadow across his cheek. Relka prepared the tray with sharper movements than usual.
Dose.
I bent over Victor, he whispered, barely moving his mouth.
I heard them.
What?
You. Last night.
Then listen better next time before you climb into a fountain.
His eyes held mine, pale blue, tired, changed.
I will.
I thought he meant he would listen. He meant he would learn. Chapter 7. The Laws Beneath His Schoolbooks. After the fountain, Victor turned pain into study. He did it slowly. A sudden change would have been easy to see, and Victor became very good at not being seen clearly. At first, he asked harmless questions.
How many signatures make a staff debt binding? What happens if a church examiner and crown officer claim the same person?
Do border warehouses answer to port law or noble land law?
His tutors liked this. They thought recovery had made him earnest. A dying heir taking interest in law touched something sentimental in men who had never been owned by paperwork. He hid donor contracts inside a Latin primer, church custody procedures beneath psalms, a port map folded into the lining of his lesson case. He let noble boys mock his limp while he learned which of them gambled, which fathers owed money, which mothers wrote letters to priests under false seals. Once, Casker returned early to the library while Victor copied a donor agreement. I was shelving books I did not read because Relka had put me there where he could watch whether standing too long affected my pulse. Victor did not startle. He let the paper slide beneath his sleeve and knocked his ink bottle over with his weak hand.
Clumsy, my lord.
Victor lowered his eyes.
Yes.
Casker saw the spilled ink. He did not see the copied name staining Victor's cuff. Another time, a visiting tutor accused a stable boy of tearing a corner from a church custody schedule. The boy had not done it. Victor had. I knew because I had seen the missing page folded into the back of his grammar book. The tutor struck the stable boy. Victor watched. That night I found him at the library table, both hands flat beside the candle. His face was still.
You let him take blame.
Yes.
You could have stopped it.
Yes.
Does that trouble you?
His mouth tightened.
It taught me which men strike before they count evidence.
You sound like your father.
He flinched. I regretted it. Not enough to take it back. He began asking about my clan's old roots while pretending to be curious about folk tales.
Did your people travel by river?
When rivers were safe.
Were ports safer? Nothing with records is safe.
Mountains, then.
I looked up from mending my wrist wrap.
Victor.
He closed the law book in front of him.
Only stories.
Trust can be tortured out of people.
I know.
You do not.
His gaze dropped to the pressure marks near his wrist. For a moment he looked young again, hurt in some old place my words had found.
No, not the way you do.
I should have left. Instead, I gave him half a route. A river town with 3 names, a bell tower with no bell, a bridge where the left arch had fallen. Enough to satisfy him. Not enough to hang us. On another evening, I saw a name written on the edge of his port map before he folded it away. Sablefin. Beside it, in smaller ink, Vare Warehouses, Harrowmere Claim, Western Fog Route. I pretended I had not seen it. Victor learned to walk with his cane. He attended lessons with noble sons who called him the Torche Ghost. He smiled gently and remembered everything. A boy named Reynold spilled wine on his coat and laughed. 3 months later, Reynolds' father lost a shipping favor after someone quietly revealed an unpaid gambling note. Victor asked me that night whether the room was too cold, as if nothing had happened. After that, I heard the teeth inside his politeness. Chapter 8. The Bride Chosen to Erase Me. Odessa brought Leonore Harrowmere to the mansion in spring. The drawing room smelled of tea, powder, and social danger. Leonore wore pale gold silk with church-approved lace at the throat. Her honey-blonde hair was pinned with loose curls, framing a face so practiced in softness it had become hard. A prayer book clutch rested in her gloved hands. Pale sapphire earrings caught the light whenever she turned toward Victor. A church donation seal hung from a ribbon on the marriage portfolio Garrick left open beside the tea service. I stood near the wall in a faded gray dress, altered from discarded household fabric, furniture with fangs. Odessa's smile was all pearl and blade.
Lady Leonore's family has long supported the church examinations in the eastern counties.
And the Harrowmere warehouses near Vare Port are spoken of very highly.
Victor sat with his cane beside his chair and his blonde hair tied loosely at the nape. He looked frail if one wanted him to. Most people wanted him to. Leonore noticed that he watched me before he watched her. She was too well trained to show irritation at once. She waited until Odessa asked me to pour tea. As I leaned near the table, Leonore's pale blue eyes moved over my wrist bindings.
How unusual,
She said lightly.
Do all Torche's servants dress above their station, or only the ones kept for delicate purposes?
Odessa's fan paused. Victor's hand closed once around his cane. I poured without spilling. Leonore smiled.
Forgive me, I am not accustomed to households where the sickroom staff attends family tea.
I am not staff.
No?
Her fingers tightened on the prayer book.
How difficult for everyone.
Later, she found me in the corridor outside my mother's wing. That was not an accident. People like Leonore did not wander. They selected.
I have a patron at St. Orvel's, a man of influence. He would be concerned to hear how closely Lord Victor keeps a vampire near him.
I stared at her lace gloves.
If your mother were moved farther from this wing, it might quiet certain worries. Distance clarifies arrangements.
I pictured my mother behind another locked door, farther away, her scent thinner in the halls.
Does your church patron know your family uses the East Vare warehouse to hide debt bonds?
Her smile cooled.
Careful. You first.
She left the next day with perfect posture and a broken negotiation. Victor never raised his voice. At dinner, he praised Leonore's embroidery, asked after her father's shipping interests, mentioned one creditor by name, and watched Garrick's attention sharpen. By morning, the Harrowmere proposal had acquired delays, then conditions, then silence. He also learned, I later discovered, which Vareport warehouse her family most feared losing. When her carriage rolled away, Leonore's chin stayed high until the last possible moment. Victor stood by the drawing room window.
Is the room too cold?
I looked at him.
Did you enjoy that?
No.
Did you do it anyway?
Yes.
You are becoming very good at making people bleed without touching them.
His pale eyes flicked to me.
Would you rather I touched them?
That answer stayed with me longer than it should have. My mother was mending a sleeve when I told her, carefully, what had happened. She listened with her needle paused above oatmeal-colored linen.
He wants to protect you.
I know.
Her tired brown eyes lifted. She tugged the thread too tight, then loosened it with the point of her needle.
A soft seam can still cut the skin if it's pulled wrong.
I looked away. She tied off the thread with small, precise fingers.
Do not excuse the binding, because the hand is gentle.
I did not say I wanted him.
No. You never say the dangerous things first.
Chapter 9, The Closed Ledger. By the winter Victor turned 21. I was 26, and the daily ritual had become unbearable for reasons the physician's ledger could not record. Victor no longer looked like a child disguised as an heir. He was lean, elegant, still pale, still shadowed beneath the eyes, but the fragility had learned posture. His coats were dove gray, storm blue, muted silver. He wore the Torche signet as if it burned only when he remembered to feel it. On bad days, his legs stiffened and he used the cane. On better days, he kept it near to make people underestimate him. Relka still brought the tray, morning and evening, basin, cloth, ledger. Relka never knew how the room changed after he left. Victor would stand too near and touch nothing. I would stay beside the bed after the dose longer than needed, pretending to adjust curtains or move a cup. A silence could gather heat without anyone naming it. One evening, after a supervised dose, I wiped my mouth, as I always did. Victor watched the motion.
You still do that?
Yes.
I hate that.
So do I.
He looked toward the closed ledger on the table. Relka had forgotten it there, or perhaps Victor had arranged for him to forget. With Victor, those had become difficult to separate.
I won't ask for anything this house already took from you.
My hand stilled against my mouth. Outside, rain touched the windows. A silver blood cup sat unused by the tray. The curtains were crimson in the candlelight, making the whole room look like a wound someone had decided was tasteful.
Do not ask like the doctors did.
His face changed, not softened, focused.
Then tell me how.
That almost undid me. Beauty would have been easier to refuse. Care moved more quietly, and I had less practice defending myself against it. I went to the door first, checked the corridor, listened for Odessa's silk, Kasker's keys, Relka's pen, my mother's cough. Then I closed the door and turned the lock myself. Victor watched my hand on the key. I crossed back to him slowly enough that either of us could have stopped pretending. He did not reach for me. I hated him a little for that, too, because it made the next movement mine. I touched his throat first, 2 fingers where his pulse beat hard beneath cool skin. He swallowed. His eyes dropped to my mouth, then away. Always that restraint, polished until it could pass for gentleness.
Look at me.
He did. I kissed him without the physician counting. The sickroom ritual had been dosage, humiliation, survival. This was a choice made inside a cage, which meant it was not clean, but it was mine. Victor's hands stayed at his sides until I took one and placed it at my waist.
Here.
He asked, voice low.
For now.
The words steadied me. He touched me as if any wrong pressure might become evidence against him. I almost laughed from the strange cruelty of it. After so many hands had pressed me into usefulness, this man who had every reason to want too much was afraid to rest his palm where I had put it.
Victor?
His fingers tightened.
That is not touching.
A breath left him, unsteady and almost embarrassed. Then his hand settled at my waist, warm through the faded silk of my dress. Buttons came undone one at a time. His waistcoat, my high collar, the wrist wraps I usually kept hidden. He paused when the bindings loosened and the faint scars across my palms showed in the candlelight. He did not kiss them as if pain could be prettied by attention. He only held my hands lightly until I decided whether to pull away. I did not. Candlelight moved over his bare chest, the old restraint marks near his wrist, the faint scar there. He looked stronger than he had any right to be, and still breakable in places no healing had touched. When his mouth brushed my shoulder, the power in me answered differently. Saliva warmed only the surface. Blood rushed hard and fierce. This moved through skin and breath and pulse, through my fingers at the back of his neck, and his hand trembling against my ribs. His body took it in unevenly at first, like a starved room taking heat. I felt his heartbeat stumble, then steady. The constant thin chill beneath his skin eased under my palms. He felt it too. His eyes opened, startled, almost afraid.
Julia.
I know.
We stopped twice, once because memory took my breath from me when his hand moved too quickly near my wrist, once because he shook so hard I thought the healing was hurting him. Both times he waited. He did not make patience noble. He simply stayed where I had left him, breathing with his forehead against mine.
Tell me.
I moved his hand. He obeyed. That mattered more than any vow could have. Afterward, the room looked rearranged, though nothing had moved except us. My collar lay on the floor. His cane rested forgotten beside the bed. The ledger remained closed on the table, its leather cover dark in the candlelight. Victor slept with color in his face I had never seen there, steady and living instead of fever-bright. I lay awake and listened to the locked door. In the morning he forgot his cane. He walked 6 steps into the wrong hallway without it. A servant saw him. I smelled her fear before she lowered her eyes. Relka noticed the change by noon. Pulse stronger, color improved, stamina unexpected. He wrote too fast, then closed the notebook too quickly when royal guards passed through the lower hall on unrelated business. Victor looked at me across the sick room. For once, neither of us pretended not to understand. Desire had healed him. It had also made me harder to hide. Chapter 10. The roster he tried to rewrite. After our relationship changed, Victor offered his wrist again. He did it in the library with the doors shut, no physician, no casker, no ledger. Rain tapped against the glass. Law books lay open around him. His signet flashed when he turned his hand palm up.
I am stronger now.
I know.
You would not have to take much.
I know that too.
He looked at me with the patience that had once been kindness and had since become something trained.
Julia.
No.
His jaw moved once. I came closer but did not touch his wrist.
Feeding from you would tangle too many things.
They are already tangled.
Not like that.
You feed from Cavan.
I went still. There it was, pain trying to sound reasonable.
Yes, because Cavan is not the man I chose. In a locked room while your father still owns my mother.
Victor's face went very calm. I should have been afraid sooner. 2 days later, I found the revised donor roster. Male staff names crossed out. Cavan Mardell removed. 3 others removed. Women substituted where possible. Older ones in debt. A widow with a son in militia service. A seamstress with a forged reference. Beside Cavan's name, the debt notation had been copied in Victor's hand, and then scraped away so hard the paper had thinned. The quill lay snapped beside the ledger. For a moment I could not move. Then I carried the book to Victor's study and set it on his desk hard enough to shake the ink. He looked at it, then at me.
You crossed out my hunger like it belonged to you.
He stood slowly, no cane. He did not deserve the grace of looking weak.
I was trying to keep them away.
That is what your father says.
The words struck exactly where I meant them to. Good, bad, both. His hand closed on the back of the chair.
Everyone in this house has touched your life without permission. Relk measures you. Casker feeds you from people he has trapped. My mother.
So you wanted one part of the cage to answer to you?
I wanted one thing. I could stop.
You did not stop it. You edited it until you could bear to look.
He said nothing. I leaned over the desk, palms flat on either side of the roster.
Your ink, your crossed out names, your better arrangement. Do you hear yourself?
His eyes lowered to the women's names he had substituted. I had seen Victor ashamed before. The fountain, the tutor's stable boy, Leonore's carriage. But this was different. This was a man realizing he had reached for the shape of his father's hand and found it familiar.
I will restore it.
That does not restore what you broke.
No.
I wanted him to argue. I wanted him to defend himself badly enough that I could hate him cleanly. He did not. The next evening, I fed from Kavan under supervision. Victor stood in the doorway. Kavan's neckcloth was loosened because Casker had insisted on the throat. I refused again and took the wrist. Kavan's eyes stayed lowered, but he knew Victor was there. Everyone knew. Victor watched, his jaw clenched, his hand tightened at his side. He did not speak. Halfway through, he left. Later, I found him in the old service corridor, the restored donor roster in one hand. I smelled his blood before I saw it. Sharp, human, fresh. He had curled his fingers so hard around the papers that his nails had opened his palm. When he saw me notice, he tried to turn his hand away. Too late.
Does restraint always require proof with you?
His mouth twitched without humor.
Apparently.
That is not comforting.
No.
He offered me the papers without touching me.
You should have this copy.
I looked at his bleeding hand. My hunger noticed the red line across his palm. I hated that it did.
I would rather you hate me than become another man who takes from your body.
The corridor was quiet, except for rain ticking through a leak in the ceiling. I did not take his wrist. I took the roster. He left before I could decide whether to thank him or throw it back. For several days, I did not let him touch me. Not my hand, not my shoulder, not even the edge of my sleeve when he passed a cup. He accepted each refusal with that careful face of his, which made me want to hurt him more. The donor roster became more than a feeding schedule between us. It became a page I could hold up and say, "Here. Here is where love tried to manage me." Chapter 11. The Cracked Bracelet. Odessa saw what she wanted to see. A loosened collar. Victor leaving my room too late. Color in his face no physician could explain. My mouth swollen because I had chosen to kiss him, not because a tray had been brought. She waited until we were alone in the private corridor near the east stairs. Her gown was icy blue satin, narrow at the sleeves, lace gloves, pearl earrings, brown hair pinned so tight not a strand dared to move. She looked immaculate enough to deny any violence before it happened.
"You filthy little thing."
I kept walking. Her hand rose. I caught her wrist, then the other, because she tried to strike with both. Since my first winter in that house, her hand had risen, and I had lowered my eyes because my mother's room was close, and Garrick's punishments were exact. Odessa had mistaken restraint for weakness. She felt the difference when my fingers closed around her bones. Her green eyes widened. The bracelet on her wrist cracked. Not loudly, just a small, expensive sound. Purple marks began rising beneath her glove line. I leaned close enough that she could see my fangs without anyone else needing to.
If you interfere with Lord Victor's healing, I will tell your husband.
Her mouth opened. I squeezed once, not enough to break, enough to teach.
He would sacrifice you before he sacrifices his bloodline.
You know that better than I do.
I let go. She stepped back, breath shallow, dignity torn more than skin. At the top of the stairs, Maud Brindle stood with a folded cloth in her hands. She had seen everything. Odessa noticed her too.
Leave us.
Maud lowered her eyes.
Yes, my lady.
But her knuckles were red around the cloth. Later that afternoon, I saw Odessa in Relka's small treatment room through a half-open door. Her gloves were off. Her wrists were swollen. Relka mixed bitter violet drops into water while she held one trembling hand under the table, as if hiding weakness from medicine could keep it from being true.
More.
You had more this morning.
Then write less.
His spectacles flashed. He wrote anyway. That evening, Maud carried a covered basket out through the west service door. No one stopped her. Senior housemaids were always carrying things no one wished to inspect. I followed far enough to see her meet Ivo Marchant in the shadow of the old chapel gate. He was a narrow church functionary with washed blue eyes and a message tube tucked beneath his arm. Maud's hand shook when she unwrapped the cloth. Odessa's cracked bracelet lay inside. Ivo did not touch the bracelet at first. He looked past Maud toward the mansion and smiled with his restless mouth.
A vampire attacked a noblewoman?
Maud's face closed.
That is what I saw.
She wrapped the bracelet again, tighter this time, and handed him the cloth. By the time I found Victor, his study door was already locked. When he opened it, there was ink on his cuff and a port schedule beneath his hand.
She went to the church.
His pale eyes moved once to the paper, then to me.
I know.
Something in his voice told me he had learned too late. Chapter 12. The Prince Who Noticed. Prince Corvin Halbrecht arrived beneath royal banners and a sky too bright for secrets. Rumors had come before him, inspection letters on Garrick's desk, court gossip folded into Odessa's correspondence, staff bandages suddenly hidden under cleaner sleeves, Casker moving the donor roster twice in 1 week. Victor had been studying Corvin for months in the sideways manner he preferred. A court notice left beneath a book, a report of a dispute between the prince and his father, a list of couriers delayed at the capital, one note in Victor's hand, almost too small to read. Corvin collects scandals before using them. When the prince entered Torchet Mansion, he wore a pale green riding coat, a royal pin, polished boots, and a smile that made servants forget to be invisible for half a second. Warm, dark hair, loose waves styled carelessly by someone expensive, amber brown eyes, a small gold earring that would have looked unserious on anyone without guards at his back. He entered like a man visiting a friend. He looked around like a man counting exits. I disliked him at once. That made me trust my judgment.
Lord Victor,
Corvin said, clasping Victor's hand.
You look less dead than court physicians promised.
Victor's smile was mild.
A disappointment to them, I'm sure.
To physicians? Always. They prefer tidy endings.
Corvin's gaze moved to me, not over me, to me.
And this is?
No one answered quickly enough, Garrick said.
A household dependent.
Corvin's brows lifted.
A beautifully vague phrase.
I assist Lord Victor's care.
His eyes sharpened with interest he disguised as charm.
Do you?
Victor's hand closed once around his cane. I smelled jealousy before I looked at him. It had become less wild over the years, more disciplined, which somehow made it more dangerous. Corvin noticed that too, his smile warmed by 1 degree. Royal men are trained to see tension because tension becomes leverage. By supper, Corvin had noticed the staff bandages, Kavan's neckcloth, a maid's covered wrist, a footman who switched a tray from left hand to right when Corvin looked too long, Relka's contradictory records, Casker moving servants away from doorways whenever I entered. The prince lifted his glass.
Your servants bleed often here.
Casker's muddy eyes went still.
Old house, Your Highness. Sharp corners.
Corvin smiled into his wine.
Convenient.
That night, Casker moved the donor roster. Victor already knew. I saw it in the way he did not look toward the steward's coat pocket. Corvin was not clean. That became clear quickly. He let a courier take blame for a misplaced letter because the delay irritated his father's court and benefited him. He asked questions that endangered servants as much as nobles. He disliked ownership, yes, but he had been raised in rooms where people became documents by noon and rumors by supper. Still, he spoke to me as if I had a mind. That was dangerous in a different shape.
Do you like horses?
He asked me in the stable yard.
No.
Honest, how rare.
I like doors that open.
His smile faded briefly.
Rarer still.
Victor heard that. He was saddling a black horse with care, his cane left against the stable wall. He did not interrupt. He only tightened the girth strap and looked at Corvin with such perfect courtesy that the prince's attention flicked between us and settled. The next day, Victor rode. Not a gentle turn in a private yard. He rode beside Corvin in the open field, royal guards watching, court physician present, Garrick glowing with restrained triumph. Victor's posture was elegant, controlled. His blonde hair had been tied back, but wind loosened it. I saw the strain in one leg when the horse shifted under him. He corrected before anyone else could notice. For one moment, when the black horse obeyed him and the field opened ahead, he almost looked happy. Then he looked toward the stable shadow where I stood. He saw my face. The pride left him. The court physician stared too long.
No natural recovery should look like that,
He said to Relka, thinking the wind would carry his voice away from me. It did not. Corvin heard too.
Why was no miracle reported to the crown?
The prince asked lightly. Garrick laughed.
A father does not run to court each time his son has a good morning.
No, but a dying heir who learns to ride again is a very good morning.
Victor looked across the field at me. Everyone's eyes sooner or later followed. Relka closed his notebook too quickly when royal guards passed behind him. Chapter 13. Blood in the riding dirt. Casker panicked before the accident. He did not call it panic. Men like Casker called panic precaution and put it in a ledger. That morning he threatened a stable servant beside the tack room with one hand on a folded debt paper and the other on his key ring.
The prince leaves frightened.
Not dead, frightened.
The stable servant's face had gone the color of old flour. I heard enough to know danger was moving, not enough to stop it. By afternoon, the field shone gold under a break in the clouds. Corvin laughed as his horse tossed its head. Victor rode beside him, too still around the mouth. Garrick watched from a raised place near the fence. Odessa stood beneath a parasol, her cracked bracelet replaced with a wider cuff. Relka kept his notebook open and wrote less than usual. Then I saw the girth strap, a shift, a wrong sag, leather pulling where it should not.
Corvin!
Too late. The strap broke at the wrong moment. Corvin's horse reared. The prince struck the ground hard enough that the sound went through the field like a thrown stone through glass. For one breath, no one moved. Then blood spread into the riding dirt. Royal blood smells no different from any other blood. That was the first thought that came to me. Petty and useless and true. Corvin lay still, warm, fair skin losing color, torn glove tangled in the reins. Guards shouted, Garrick barked orders. Relka ran forward with his satchel, already too late. I saw the wound. I saw the prince's mouth fill red. I saw, behind him, Maud Brindle watching from the stable arch, with one hand pressed to her hidden mourning pin. If Corvin died there, the crown would tear the house apart. If he lived naturally, he might still tear the house apart. If I healed him, everyone would know. Mercy felt like one more locked door with fire behind it. I cut my palm with Kavan's stable knife before I could think myself out of it. Victor shouted my name. I dropped beside Corvin and pressed my blood to his mouth, then to the wound. Healing moved fast through blood, faster than saliva, faster than tears, faster than the careful little doses Relka had measured for years. Corvin's body fought, then accepted. Bone shifted beneath my hand. Torn flesh pulled together. Blood vanished from the open wound as if drawn backward into him. The field went silent, not quiet. Silent, the kind of silence that changes law. Corvin gasped and opened his amber-brown eyes. He looked at me first, then at the witnesses, then at Victor, who stood 10 paces away with his face emptied of everything public. The prince whispered, voice ragged.
That explains quite a lot.
By dusk, the secret belonged to the crown, the church, and every frightened witness who believed selling the truth first might save them. Casker tried coin, he tried threats, he tried moving servants into locked rooms. Royal guards did not take Torche coin easily. Churchmen took testimony like hungry dogs take meat. Maud Brindle confirmed the rumor to Evo Marchant before nightfall. She did not tell him a frightened girl had saved a prince. She told him a vampire had opened her own palm and made royal blood obey. Corvin sent for his torn glove and held it for a long time before giving it to a guard. When his eyes met mine across the courtyard, the charm was gone from them. Guilt sat badly on princes. They were not dressed for it. Chapter 14. The the court that called me treasure. Within days, I stood in a royal receiving chamber under heavy seals, while men argued over who had the cleaner right to own me. Oedran Halbrecht, crown ruler, sat beneath a crimson canopy, iron gray hair swept back, pale amber eyes heavy-lidded and almost bored. His jeweled gloves rested near a custody order case.
A national treasure, rare beyond calculation. The Crown will not permit private concealment of such an asset.
High Church Examiner. Merrick Volcrane stood rigid in white robes, pale gray eyes unblinking. A custody chain hung from his long fingers. A ritual scar marked the back of one hand.
Abomination. Her healing imitates grace and corrupts suffering. Look at her eyes. Even the blood marks itself in her.
Treasure from one mouth, corruption from another. Neither meant woman. A silver collar lay on a velvet cloth, not yet locked. Its hinge was open. Its inner edge was lined with pale symbols I did not know and did not want to learn. Relka measured my pulse, because habit can survive shame. My mother's name appeared on a separate transfer document. Separate. That word cut deeper than the collar. Garrick argued regional stability, Victor's need, his heir, his house, his rights. He sounded offended that larger predators had found the meat. Corvin stood near a window, still pale from the accident, but alive because my blood had made him so. His torn riding glove had been replaced. His expression was lazy enough to hide work. Petra Tolliver, a royal clerk with ink-stained cuffs and sharp dark hazel eyes, moved between tables with a document satchel against her hip. She dropped the Crown inventory seal once, not far, only enough that 3 men looked down at the same time. While Oedran's chamberlain snapped at her, she slid a custody schedule under a petition stack and trimmed a wax tab with a small seal knife. Corvin coughed exactly when the blade clicked. The transport time changed by 1 hour. No one said so aloud. Victor stood across the chamber, too still. No cane, no visible panic, no plea. His pale eyes did not meet mine. I waited. He spoke to Garrick, quietly, formally, something about donor contracts, missing servants, illegal confinement, church jurisdiction, port debts. Words I could not fully hear beneath the blood rushing in my ears. He did not look at me. The donor roster rose in my memory. Male names crossed out, his hand controlling the page because looking at my hunger had hurt him. Now here was a larger room, a larger ledger, a larger silence. I thought, he has found a way to write me into it. That hurt more than the collar. A guard lifted the silver band from the velvet cloth to measure it against my throat. Cold touched the skin below my jaw. My fangs pressed down, my hands curled. The guards beside me shifted. Merrick watched as if he wanted me to bite. Corvin said mildly,
"If the church intends to prove corruption, Examiner, it may wish not to provoke the evidence in front of the Crown."
Merrick's fingers tightened around the custody chain. Petra reappeared with another paper.
The collar seal lacks the third witness mark.
Oedran's heavy eyes moved to her. She bowed.
It can be corrected before transport, Your Majesty.
The collar returned to the velvet cloth. My mother was moved first. I lunged when I saw her name on the separate paper. 2 guards caught my arms. Merrick's white-gloved fingers tightened on the custody chain. Victor did not move. His jaw tightened once. That was all. I let the guards drag me because if I fought there, they would have an excuse to chain my mother as well. As they took me from the chamber, I looked back one last time. Victor was speaking to Corvin now, low, controlled. The prince's smile had disappeared. Victor still did not look at me. Chapter 15, The Cell with the Fountain Seal. The crown-holding room had a cold stone floor and no curtains. Rain scratched at the narrow window. Church riders waited somewhere beyond the yard. My mother's transfer papers had gone down another corridor. I listened until footsteps, voices, and doors tangled beyond usefulness. They brought food. It cooled untouched. They brought water. I smelled metal and left it. They brought a sealed cup of blood near midnight. The guard who carried it was not one of the men from the receiving chamber. Solid build, cropped dark hair, gray-brown eyes, tired and wary. His uniform sat correctly, but his throat smelled of fear.
Drink.
Who sent it?
His hand tightened on the cup.
Someone who said you'd know the seal.
I looked. The wax mark was tiny. A fountain. My body remembered black water, ice at the rim, Victor shivering beneath my hands. Stop making me responsible for your dying. Do something useful with the life I keep putting back into you. The seal could mean rescue. It could mean apology. It could mean goodbye. It could also mean poison dressed in memory. Victor had learned from men who hid knives inside paperwork. I had loved him anyway. That did not make me stupid.
What is your name?
The guard swallowed.
Bram Harlow.
Who bought you?
His eyes flicked to the door.
My brother owed a prison fine to a crown quartermaster. My mother's eviction paper had the king's seal on it. Both disappeared yesterday.
Where are they now?
On a cart north, if the cart wasn't stopped.
Who told you that?
A man with pale hair who knew my brother's cell number.
Victor, then, or someone sent by him. Bram looked as if he hated the hope in his own voice.
I am to deliver the cup and be gone by dawn.
Gone where?
I was told not to ask.
Smart man, whoever told him. I took the cup, blood, human, not drugged as far as scent could tell, fresh enough to warm the ceramic. My hunger moved under my skin like something waking angry. I drank because survival was still the only answer I could control. When the cup was empty, the wax seal floated loose at the bottom. I listened again. The guard outside my door shifted differently from the first one. Lighter on the left foot, not royal drill. Substitution. A plan was moving around me. I did not know whether it belonged to Victor, Corvin, Petra, or all of them. I did not need proof to use an opening. Footsteps stopped outside the door. Bram's voice came through, strained.
When I open, do not look surprised.
I rarely do.
The lock turned. Chapter 16. The door I would not leave without. The altered custody time gave us 1 hour. 1 hour because Petra Tolliver had changed a schedule with the seal knife. 1 hour because Corvin had leaked a false transport order, sending church riders toward the wrong estate. 1 hour because Victor had bought debts, threatened ports, fed blackmail files to smugglers, and apparently decided I could be moved like a sealed crate if the route was clever enough. He had forgotten one thing, or perhaps he had trusted I would not.
My mother.
Bram shoved a false custody cloak into my hands.
The party waits below.
My mother.
His face tightened.
I was told...
I caught the front of his uniform and pushed him against the wall quietly enough that the guard at the far turn did not hear. My fangs showed.
You were told what men always tell each other when they move women on paper. Where is she?
He stared at me, then his eyes changed. Calculation moved through his terror.
East Service Passage. Second locked room past the old pantry. 1 guard.
I let him go. The passage had been left unwatched too neatly. Victor's work, maybe. Corvin's, both. It did not matter. I knew corridors better than any plan because I had walked them while afraid. Iron, rain, old wood, medicine, my mother. I found the door by scent before I saw it. A crown guard stood in front of it, one hand near his sword. He was not bribed. His pulse jumped when he saw me.
Back.
No.
He drew breath to shout. I crossed the space and bit him high at the collar, fast, controlled, taking just enough blood to drop his knees from under him. He hit the wall, then the floor, alive. He would wake with a mark that shortened our time. I took his keys. My hands shook so badly the first key scraped wrong. Then the lock turned, and the door opened. My mother sat on a narrow bed in her patched shawl, a cloth handkerchief in one hand. Her dark hair with silver strands had been pinned back carefully, because even fear could not take that habit from her. Her warm brown eyes filled when she saw me.
Julia.
We have minutes.
Then do not spend one crying.
she said, already standing. I almost laughed. It came out wrong. She limped when she crossed the room. I caught her weight. She smelled of medicine, exhaustion, and home. On the table lay a duplicate transport paper with the correct port route. I took it, folded it, and tucked it inside my bodice. My mother saw.
Destroy it later.
Hide it first.
That is my girl.
We moved through the service passage with Bram ahead, and my mother leaning against me. At the lower door, rain struck the threshold in silver lines. The stolen key bit into my palm so hard it opened one of the old scars. A man with sea-green eyes and dark blonde hair tied back waited under an oiled coat. Broad shoulders, broken nose, salt and smoke in his clothes. Rurik Sablefin.
We have minutes.
Then move faster.
I'm not leaving her.
His mouth twitched.
So I was warm.
Outside, fog covered the border road like a second country. Chapter 17. The Port Bought with Blackmail. At Vere Port, lanterns swung in sea wind. Wool crates waited on a smuggler's cart. False papers passed from hand to hand. Rurik counted blackmail files instead of coins, licking one thumb before turning pages as if noble crimes were market goods. His cracked glass lantern sat near his boots, flame bending in the wind. He stopped on one packet and read the seal.
Harrowmere. That warehouse is still guarded.
Bram muttered. Rurik smiled without warmth.
Not by men who want this page read aloud.
Inside the packet were port debts, church donations, and a warehouse schedule written in a hand I recognized from Victor's map notes. Leonore's family had tried to erase me from a drawing room. Now their fear bought me fog. Rurik tucked the packet inside his coat.
This pays the crossing. The rest pays silence.
What pays betrayal?
He looked at me with narrowed sea-green eyes.
Distance. If I betray you, the new marquis releases the pages I keep hidden from my own partners. I prefer my throat uncut.
Cavan Mardell stood near the crates with his stable gloves tucked into his belt. His neckcloth was gone. The bite marks showed.
You're leaving?
He looked toward the inland road.
False trail.
My stomach tightened.
You know what that means.
He rubbed the old rope burn on his wrist. From inside his coat, he pulled a folded debt paper, creased and stained at one edge. For the first time since I had known him, it was not in Casker's hand.
Lord Victor bought the debt. Burned the copy in front of me. My sister's papers are clean.
That does not require you to run bait for royal riders.
No.
His dark blue eyes met mine once.
But it gives me a horse, a road, and a chance to decide which danger is mine.
I wanted to apologize for every time my mouth had made his body part of my survival. I did not. There was no time, and apologies can become another weight when a person needs to run.
Lev.
He nodded once.
You too.
He tied the debt paper into the lining of his coat, mounted a bay horse, and rode east with his neck uncovered to the fog. The donor who had once made Victor jealous carried a trail meant to draw hunters away from me. Only then did I see what Victor had learned. Possession had failed him before. Strategy, at least, had opened a road. The boat pulled away before dawn. I was hidden beneath wool with my mother pressed beside me, her fingers locked around mine. Through a gap between crates, I saw the shore. Victor stood at the edge of the port road in a dark coat, no guards near him. Wind pulled at his blonde hair. His cane was in his hand, but he was not leaning on it. He did not come toward the boat. He turned back toward the mansion. For one foolish second, I thought he would look over his shoulder. He did not. The fog took him. Chapter 18. The House That Ate Its Own Masters. Later, people told stories about what happened to Torchet Mansion after I left. Newspapers told cleaner ones. The donor ledger burned in a study fireplace. Some records vanished. Others appeared in the hands of creditors, church advocates, crown officers, and men who had thought themselves safe because they had written their crimes in polite ink. Garrick Torchet tried to have his son declared unfit. Victor used years of collected debts, witness statements, missing servant records, succession fraud, illegal confinement evidence, and church custody violations to make that impossible. He did not expose everything. He exposed exactly enough. One paper printed only 6 lines about the first hearing. The heir of Torchet presented records suggesting improper confinement of several household dependents and irregular handling of estate debts. Household dependents. I read the phrase until the letters blurred. Another report said Odessa Torchet had attempted to assist church examiners in locating an unnamed vampire fugitive. Her private letters surfaced before her testimony could be taken. Then came mention of Relka's violet medicine, bribed confessions, and a physician's ledger whose pages had been partly burned. Her credibility died before she did. The official report called her death an illness. Servants whispered she screamed.
Healer.
Before the fever took her. Garrick suffered a stroke after a private confrontation. The official report called that a stroke too. A smuggler from Rurik's network brought us a rumor no paper printed. Garrick was found in the locked study, one hand gripping the bed frame they had dragged inside for him, the old pocket watch crushed under his palm. Victor's cane lay cold in the fireplace ash, unburned because the wood was too polished to catch. Another rumor said the new marquis stopped at the old sickroom door every morning and did not enter. Rumors are cheap. I kept that one anyway. I read those words in whispers 2 countries away in a safe house, with rain on the window and a blood cup hidden behind stacked newspapers. Pavel Rowan, our keeper, had green-gray eyes, a crooked smile, and a coded feeding ledger he locked twice. He arranged donors carefully, foreigners with debts to smugglers instead of nobles. His first rule was simple: no donor twice in the same week, no donor who asks too many questions, no donor who smells of incense. Freedom would not have needed locks on a feeding ledger. This was safer math. My mother slept beneath a patched blanket while I read every newspaper until the ink smudged my fingers. Trials, succession disputes, church inquiries, court petitions, royal displeasure, Prince Corvin's name appearing in columns that pretended he had been nowhere near the useful delays. Petra Tolliver never mentioned at all, Kavan not mentioned, which I chose to take as hope. One feeding nearly exposed me. A dock worker recognized my accent from church notices and stared too long at my eyes.
Red,
he said, too softly. I pulled my hood lower, but not before his gaze sharpened. Pavel moved us before dawn. My mother packed in silence, tucking her needle case into her shawl. We spent 2 days in a cellar beneath a cooper's shop while church travelers drank above us and argued over whether vampire eyes were crimson, ruby, or garnet. By the second night, hunger made the barrel hoops hum. My mother pressed her hand over mine in the dark.
You cannot read yourself into certainty,
she said when we reached the next safe house.
I can try.
You can bleed doing it. I am good at that.
She gave me the tired look mothers use when daughters mistake bitterness for wit. Freedom had a roof and no address for the next 2 years. I learned which streets smelled of church incense, which shutters opened too quickly, which donors were too curious, which letters must be burned before they became evidence. Once, a report suggested Victor might marry to stabilize his house. I wrote a letter that night. Victor, I stopped because I did not know what came after his name that would not betray me. I burned the paper before dawn. Another report named Odessa dead. Another named Garrick bedridden. Another said the Torchet heir had assumed all duties of the marquessate, pending formal recognition. Then, at last, Victor Torchet, confirmed as Marquis Torchet following extended incapacitation of Lord Garrick Torchet. New Marquis. I read the words 3 times. My mother looked up from mending.
Is he alive?
Yes.
Are you relieved?
I folded the paper carefully so she would not see my hands.
I do not know what I am.
Inside the stack of newspapers, I kept one sweet wrapper from the old windowsill. Pale rose, worn soft at the creases. I had carried it through a mansion, a holding room, a port, a boat, 3 safe houses, and every version of myself that said I did not need such things. Sava's old warning lived in me still. Kind nobles become dangerous once they believe they are owed gratitude. Victor was no longer only kind, that frightened me more. Chapter 19. The Wrist Offered Without a Chain. The night he returned, rain came first. It tapped the safe house shutters in a pattern that made my mother wake and reach for the knife Pavel kept under the breadboard. I stood before she did. Hunger sharpened sound at the edges. I had gone too long on thin blood, saving the last proper cup in case we needed to run. 3 knocks. Not Pavel's, not Rurik's. My mother looked at me. I crossed the room without lighting the lamp. One hand near the hidden blade, one hand at my collar, touching the old clan charm. Through the door, a man said,
Julia.
My body knew his voice before my mind permitted it. I opened the door with the chain still fastened. Victor stood in the rain. He had brought no guards. No carriage waited behind him. No royal escort. No Torche men. No church riders dragged behind him as proof of victory. Only Victor in a dark, storm-blue coat, wet at the shoulders, blonde hair tied loosely at the nape, pale face thinner than memory and harder too. His eyes were still gentle if one looked quickly. I had learned not to look quickly. The Torche signet sat on his hand. He had turned it inward, toward his palm, as if he could not bear the crest facing me. His posture was upright, controlled, but one leg held a stiffness the old boy would have tried to hide. In his left hand he carried folded gloves, no cane. That told me nothing. Victor had always known when to display weakness and when to leave it at home. He stopped at the threshold. He did not step inside.
No guards?
Not this time.
The chain remained between us. Behind me, my mother sat very still.
You let me think you sold me.
Rain ran down his temple. His eyes did not leave mine.
Yes.
I hated him for not defending himself. I hated him more for knowing a defense would insult me.
2 years.
I'm sorry. It had to be done.
I read your death in every paper before I found your name.
His hand tightened once around the gloves.
I read a marriage notice and burned a letter before dawn. I read your mother's illness 3 times because I thought there might be a confession between the lines. I read your father's stroke and wondered whose hand had shut the study door.
That reached him. I saw it in the faint movement of his jaw, the small tremor in the hand bearing the signet before he turned it farther inward. The metal pressed into his palm, hard enough to leave a mark.
I had to become visible enough to hold the house, and quiet enough not to lead them here.
Do not make this sound clean. You kept me in the dark.
I wasn't going to.
Good. The rain filled the space where softer people might have put forgiveness. He looked past me once, not entering, not searching the room like a noble taking inventory.
Is your mother safe?
She is listening to every word.
From inside, my mother said,
Not every word. Some of them are too foolish to keep.
For the first time, Victor almost smiled. It faded before it became comfort.
What happened to your parents?
He looked down at his signet. The silence was long enough to answer more than words would have.
The house is mine now.
Innocence would have sounded different. So would confession. I thought of Odessa's cracked bracelet, Garrick's pocket watch, burned ledgers, servants who would not meet the new Marquis's eyes, a stroke recorded by men paid to prefer simple explanations, an illness that took a woman after her letters became inconvenient.
You became what I told you to become.
Useful.
Dangerous.
He accepted that as if I had placed something heavy in his hands, and he had expected the weight.
Yes.
I unfastened the chain. The door opened wider. Still he did not step in. Instead, Victor removed one glove. Slowly, carefully. He folded it over the other and tucked both beneath his arm. Then he offered me his bare wrist. There was no demand in it, no fever, no boy trying to make himself weak enough to keep me, no man crossing out names because jealousy hurt. Only a wrist extended in the rain, steady except for one small pulse beneath the skin.
I am strong enough now.
My hunger noticed first, it always does. Blood under cool skin, human warmth. The old answer of my body to what I needed. Then the rest of me followed. The sickroom girl wiping her mouth until it split, the child at the locked door, the vampire in the corridor with Cavan's pulse under her tongue, the woman at the closed ledger, the captive in the court chamber, the fugitive beneath wool crates watching him walk back into the house that made him. I took his wrist. His breath changed. I did not bite. Not yet. I held him there, close enough that my mouth hovered above the offered vein, close enough to feel the life I had spent years returning to him. Victor waited outside my threshold in the rain. His signet faced his palm. His wrist rested in my hand. And this time no one counted.
I hope I kept you company with my story. It would mean so much for you to like and subscribe because it helps me make more. I'll see you in the next one.